Spangler. This is our next episode of Two Wings podcast. I'm here today with Barry Stidham, longtime friend of mine and the director of aviation of a flight department that's been around for like 70 plus years, which is pretty impressive. Barry and I met probably 9 years ago or something like that, and pretty funny experience. I was trying to get involved in the business aviation community out here in Denver, Colorado. He invited me to lunch one day, and I'm in sales, so I never pass up a free lunch. And he bought me lunch and suckered me right into this organization out here, a business aviation organization, which I later took over as the chairman for. So that's how he wooed me. So just truth be told, a free lunch will get you a lot of volunteer work. But anyways,
it buys a lot of goodwill.
It does buy a lot of goodwill, so I can easily be bought. Anyway, so Barry's here today. We're going to talk a little bit about corporate flight departments and the value of the corporate flight department and kind of the evolution of the corporate flight department. But first, tell me a little bit about your background, how long you've been with the company, and how you got started.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I've been around, I've been with my company for 26 years. Our company's been in existence for a little over 140.
Wow.
So it's a pretty good run. And in those 26 years, I've had a couple of different titles, and I've worked my way up to the director of aviation now. And basically what we do is just support our staff, our C-suite folks, our operations folks, our customers, plant personnel. It just kind of depends on the need, but the airplanes are available to everybody.
So tell me how you got started in aviation. Like, you learned how to fly at this airport, right?
I did. So I knew I wanted to fly when I was a little kid, and I learned how to fly. Started when I was 16 years old in high school. I'm born and raised at this airport, and just fell into this job at the airport.
I got to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
Your dad is also a pilot, correct?
He is, but I was actually the first pilot of the family.
I did not know that.
He followed my footsteps on this one.
Good to know.
But yeah, so it's been an interesting run, and how I met the folks at the company that I'm at now is after college. I worked at this airport in line service. So I was towing and gassing airplanes and doing that kind of thing. And I had met all of those folks at that job. And the time came when the company decided to move to Denver. And my brother, of all things, found a help wanted advertisement in the Denver Post newspaper.
Really?
So I put in my stuff, put in my credentials and my application, and here we are 26 years later.
26 years. That's amazing. So did you start, what was your role initially at this company? Was it starting out as a line pilot?
Yeah, exactly. So I was by far the youngest person here. I was just the line pilot. We had 6 pilots at the time, 2 mechanics, and a scheduler dispatcher. We're very similar now. We haven't changed a whole lot. We had 2 airplanes back then. We have 2 airplanes now. But then I went from that role, and then as part of the transition into this role, and I was chief pilot for a year, and then promoted to director of aviation and chief pilot.
Excellent. Well, I know a lot of your folks here. It seems like a family operation. Like, you guys really take good care of each other. It looks to me like you guys have a lot of fun at your job. Which I think is critical for any longevity at a company. But it looks like you guys have a lot of fun here.
It is. I mean, why would you do it if it's not fun, right? But we have a really good culture, right? There's a lot of humility. There's a lot of collaboration, right? I think, as there should be.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but I think that's how it should be. And we're all friends, right? We care for each other. We know each other's kids. We know the names. We know where they're at in life. We know it's important to each other, and it's really a great place. It's very familial.
Yeah.
And that's what I like.
Yeah, that's really great. I always say, like, you never work a day in your life if you really enjoy what you do. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it a secret because it doesn't feel like work at all.
Right. So, as we talk about the evolution of the corporate flight department here in the US, and your operation is flying all over the world, just to make that clear, um, tell me a little bit in your 26-year career what you've seen happen up to this point before we get into like where we see corporate flight departments going. But tell us a little bit about the evolution, some of your upgrade paths, and some of the challenges that you've seen.
Yeah, our group, as Candy mentioned, right? We've had airplanes for 70 plus years. I haven't quite been able to pin down the exact number, but I know it's 70 plus. And when I started with the company, we were we were much smaller, right? We were basically U.S. centric
Yeah,
based. We did a little bit of Canada and a little bit of Central America, South America stuff. But as the company has grown, our flight department has grown in capability, right? We went from a couple of West Winds when I first started
wow,
into the Challenger series, and now we have a Challenger 350 and a Global 6000, right? So we support the company
that's a big
worldwide.
step up from the West Wind.
It's been, yeah, it's Flintstones to Jetsons, right?
Yeah,
But it's really been a neat, steady path
yeah,
that we've grown, and it's been fun just to be able to support the group.
yeah. So, do you think that the corporate flight department has contributed? You said that it was like a US centric group, and now you're worldwide. What role did business aviation play in that growth?
Well, it really makes it a lot easier to get around the world quickly and efficiently,
Yeah,
right? Our group, we first went out into Europe, and then we've just recently done a big acquisition to where we're in South America. We have some assets out in Southeast Asia. And really our role in the company is just to support that growth and support the leadership and the team that builds this company,
yeah,
right? There's a ton of many really smart, talented folks here, and we can just make their life a little bit better, a little bit more efficient, and aid in all of that growth.
yeah. It's interesting. I used to work with a company called JSSI, and one of our advisory board members was Colonel Mark Tillman, who is the chief pilot of Air Force One. And I used to have the opportunity to go see him speak at different engagements around the country. But one of the things that he brought up for Air Force One, it was a zero fail mission, always.
Right.
Like their job and their number one goal was to be sort of this invisible support system. They were never to take away from the president's message. There was an incident where Air Force One, I think it was with when Obama took office, the Air Force One, the team, the flight department for Air Force One, did this flyby of the Statue of Liberty, and it was right after 9/11, and everybody was like, it took away from the president's message, and it was really interesting to hear Mark talk about this. But the corporate flight department, as we've talked about, we kind of want to be in the background. We don't want to take away from the company's messaging. We don't want to be looked at as the rich corporate fat cats being, ushered around the country. This is a business tool. It makes you more efficient. And I like to say, I sell time for a living. I sell airplanes, and I really sell time. And so our goal as the operators, or your goal as the operator, is really to be in the background where you perform flawlessly every single time. You're not taking away from your company's message, but really it allows you to your company to grow and flourish, and your executive leadership to be more efficient without you taking the light, limelight away. So that was something that I had heard from Mark Tillman, and it really kind of resonates with what you're talking about, where you're there to support the executives and the engineers and the sales team and all of that to help grow your company.
Yeah, exactly. You're spot on, right? Like anonymity is good. I've always preached that. We've been approached many times by some of the written publications to be featured in, and we just don't want to do that. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. We do like to be in the background. And, you know, our company is a great company, and the flight department doesn't make this company.
Right.
It's the 16,000 employees that we have that do all the real work, that create the product that benefits the public, right?
Right.
That's the magic. Those guys are the secret sauce, right? We're just in support, in the background, just to do our best to bring value to the folks that lead this company and to the key decision makers of this company and to all of the other stakeholders of this company. Um, yeah,
So
just
let's talk a little bit about some of the key benefits that business aviation, whether you have your own corporate flight department or you're using business aviation, and whether it be fractional, charter, or whatnot. I want to talk about what are the key benefits that your company and others like yours are getting from the use of business aviation. We talked about time, but you and I have talked about efficiency and city pairs and security and all of those things. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, sure. You know, we basically our biggest value is time, right? We buy time. You know, it's an expensive proposition. You can certainly look at the math of all of it and decide that it's too expensive. You can look at the value proposition of the time that we save and maybe start to decide, like, man, that's really worth it, right? So we just did a study of our flight department and the time value that we save over the airlines, right? So our methodology was we looked at every leg that we had, and we would compare the time that it took for us to fly from our airport to the point of destination compared to what the airlines do in drive times and wait times and all of that. So over the course of the year, we saved somewhere in the number of 2,700 hours.
Wow.
Which, if the math is right, is somewhere between like about 111 weeks, right, for the 5-day work week, and or 111 days, and then that equates to like 22 weeks or so for the 5-day work week.
So they're saving that much time.
We're saving that much time for our people.
Wow.
Right? Now, how you equate that, and if you want to put math to it, like the common thing that the industry seems to do is they'll look at the compensation package of the people that we fly and try to break that down into a day or an hourly rate or whatever. And, you know, that's a good method,
Yeah.
right? That's fair, and I agree. It's pretty dry, and but it makes sense. But I like to personalize it.
Yeah.
And really what our value brings is the ability to get you home to your kids' performances or volleyball games or basketball games, or just to be present in your family.
Yeah. And that's tough to quantify, right? So we're trying to put a value on your time, and that's different for everybody. But to your point, when we talk about the ability to get you home at night, so you can, case in point, one metric that I like to tell people is there are 5,000 airports, public use airports in the United States. Only about 500 of them are served by commercial aviation. So the savings, the time savings that you're talking about is if you can only go to those 500 airports, now you've got to get a car service or you got to rent a car or something like that. And you're reaching rural communities, right?
Exactly.
Right. You don't have your plant in the heart of New York. You don't have your plant in the heart of Dallas. You have your plants in rural America, and you can reach those destinations more efficiently and save more time through business aviation.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we might fly to 90 different destinations a year, typically. Maybe about 10 of those are the major city centers,
Yeah.
right? And the big airports. So 80 of those is rural America, is rural South America, is rural Europe. It's where our facility locations are, and it's where our customer locations are, and we can get there efficiently. We can do multiple stops in a day. We could do 3 or 4 different stops to visit plants in a day and do it very effectively.
What's interesting to me is we're talking about domestic right now, and you're flying all over the world. So with your global aircraft, I think about like the time savings is even exponential when you talk about that, because your airplane can go so far. But not only that, your team, whoever's flying on the airplane, can now sleep on the airplane while you're en route to your destination. They're well rested. They can land and go straight to a meeting and be completely fresh for that. But internationally, I got to imagine it's even a bigger time savings.
Well, absolutely, absolutely, and it's a very effective and efficient use of time. Like to your point, we fly those trips through the night, so our team can sleep, and then they just hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So we don't lose a day. And what's very interesting over the years in seeing our folks do this is they don't have a day to give.
Yeah.
Right. So they really need to be effective and efficient in the use of their time, and that's what we provide for them.
So one of the things that I learned about your flight department in particular early on when you and I became friends is the fact that your airplanes, while beautiful and very efficient, and they look great, and your maintenance staff keeps the airplanes in great shape, but you've really made a conscious effort to make the interior of your airplanes very I don't want to use the word sterile, but it's very businesslike. You did not install entertainment systems. You don't have a lot of the frills that a lot of other corporate jets have, because you want to make sure that the public perception isn't that you guys are having a good old time flying from point A to point B, right? But it's very much an airborne office. And you want it to look like that, not only for the outside world, but for your clients, for your employees. It was very intentional, right?
Yeah, absolutely. How I describe our flight department is we're a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, typically, use, right? On occasion, we'll do weekends, but it's very rare that we fly a holiday. Right? And we're not doing any personal travel for any of our people, right? It's very, very limited if we do at all, right? It's a business tool, and we've chosen to be very conservative, right? We're not splashy.
Yeah.
We're a quiet, conservative company, and our aircraft mirror the company culture.
Sure.
Right? But the beauty of it is when we put 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 folks in our airplane, and I look back to see what they're doing, if they're not sleeping, they're working.
Yeah.
Right? And then they're collaborating and they're working as a group, and it's very efficient. So that's just how we operate, right? Our aircraft are business tools. They support the business. I know high net worths tend to be different, right? Yeah. And it's a different model. And it's a good model for them. It works for them. But this is what works for us, is our Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we put people in the airplane and make them work.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about some stats of the business aviation industry next. And then we'll talk a little bit about where we're going as an industry. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the statistics of business aviation. NBAA, the National Business Aviation Association, put together some stats for us that I want to share with you, and we'll see how they apply to your operation here. But one of the stats is 80% of business aircraft flights are to small towns and communities. And you brought that up earlier, like the majority of your flights are to small towns and communities.
Yeah, that absolutely reflects what we do, right?
Yeah.
It's of those 5,000 rural airports that you talked about, yeah, as we mentioned before, we go to about 80 of them, right? So that's kind of the proof in the pudding, if you will,
Yeah.
of the effectiveness of the airplane, because those places are hard to get to.
They are. As somebody that's flown around the U.S. a lot in tiny little, piston airplanes, there's a lot of airports out there that serve very small communities. And what I love about this stat is the effectiveness or the impact that your company has on the rural communities throughout America. So think about the jobs that your company is creating in those small communities, the families that you're feeding in those small communities. That's really impactful to me. That doesn't, the media does such a great job of painting business aviation in such a negative light.
Right.
And it really aggravates me. Certainly I'm biased, but at the same time, like, business aviation allows for us to create manufacturing plants and base manufacturing plants in these very small towns that otherwise would probably fade away.
Yeah, often, many times it has in
Yeah.
history, right? And again, you're absolutely right with the communities that we reach, right? So, our organization, our 2 airplanes support 16,000 employees in our organization, right? And our leadership team is responsible for those 16,000 employees. Well, you multiply that, say, times 3, right? So you have a family of 3. Now we're representing 48,000 folks. And the economic value that we bring into these communities is jobs, is we do goodwill events, right? So we will clean up the communities, trash pickups, recycling days, those kinds of things. It's not just flying in and out, but it's really developing community, supporting that community, and doing what we can for those families in those rural locations.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we still have the ability to support small town environments where it's more affordable to have a house, to have a family, but still have a really good job at those communities. I have another client here in Colorado. Actually, he's got business aircraft, they're King Airs, and he's got a hospital network, and he's able to fly specialists to these small communities, and those doctors can go to that same small community and give them specialized medicine, and those doctors get to go home every night.
Right.
And that is another use of business aviation. And so it's not just the company creating the jobs, it's the hospital network, the medical care. Business aviation does so much, and yet it's talked about so little, because again, we're the industry that is, we're quietly in the background making America work. One of the other stats that I have here is that business aviation supports over 1 million jobs just here in the United States. And that's not just manufacturing. That is the guys fueling the airplanes, the guys working on the airplanes, flight attendants, dispatchers. There's a whole host of jobs that support our industry. And we're also a major exporter of business aircraft, which the U.S., honestly, we're not a major exporter of much of anything anymore.
Very true, right, right.
But yet, when it comes to aircraft, we are a major exporter. And so it's huge for our economy that this industry, commercial and business aviation, flourishes. So that was really interesting that you talked about. How many jobs does your company?
Well, we have 16,000 employees, right? So, and yeah, to your point, I think that million number is jobs that are just directly associated with aircraft operation, right? But think of the companies that have airplanes and the tens of millions of folks really that it's down the chain a ways, but do benefit from the impact of the folks that these airplanes are moving around.
Yeah.
Right. And then I just want to touch on your example with the medical flights, right, that you do. Think about those patients that live in rural communities, right? So economically, those rural communities might not be as well off as in some of the big cities, right? So there's economic considerations, but those folks then would have to travel to the city center to try to get this treatment, right? And that drive could be prohibitive cost-wise. It could take a day. It could take a half a day.
Right.
And this doctor appointment, where it could have been just a half an hour trip down the road, could turn into a 2 or 3 day event possibly. Right. So there is there really is a lot of good.
A
You
lot.
and I know, and of
Yeah.
course we're biased, but what you see in the media and in the print are the emotional hot points
Right.
that stir emotion and stir anger and divide and stir class differentiation, if
Right.
you will. And it's just a shame that it always goes that direction because there's so much more good that we bring
Then we're led to believe.
than we're led to believe.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're not again trying to be the quiet industry that just zero fail mission and not taking away from the message or the medical resources or whatnot. So that is a really nice segue actually into our next segment, or what I really wanted to dive into here, which is the evolution of the corporate flight department, and really business aviation in general. There are two things that I feel like are really kind of hot topics today that are certainly going to be a challenge for you, but are going to be a challenge for a lot of our listeners. So one of those items is public scrutiny, and we touched on that. The media does a great job of making us out to be horrible. We're just in it for the profit and all this other stuff. And then we've got a newer issue that has come to light, which is our carbon footprint and our
Right.
environmental impact as a business aviation industry. One of the other stats that I read from one of the industry sources, business aviation accounts for 0.04% of man-made carbon emissions in the world. So it's a pretty low number right now.
Right. Right.
And yet, we're still making strides to be more efficient. We want to be a good steward of the earth. We don't want to leave a large carbon footprint. We want to do our part in making sure that this world is here for a long time for our kids and their kids and whatnot. But we're starting to see some environmentalists doing some things, certainly in Europe,
Right.
where they're spray painting business aircraft because they're so terrible. The reality is there's a lot of other terrible industries out there that are much
Right.
worse than ours, but
Right.
we're great media attention.
Yeah.
People love to see a spray painted business jet, and so we're an easy target, yet we're still like one of the lowest impacts on the carbon emissions. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but first, public scrutiny. We talked about the fact that you make a very conscious effort to make your airplanes an airborne office where work is being done or you're sleeping, right?
Right.
Those are the two things you're allowed to do on these
Yeah.
airplanes. I can
Yeah.
kind of see you getting in the back and doing your briefing,
I'll
like,
keep 'em in
here's
line.
the emergency
Yeah,
exits,
exactly.
and there's no having fun on this airplane.
No, we have to have fun
Okay,
after we get our work done.
all right,
Of course.
all right.
Yeah.
You 5-hour flight, the last hour is set aside for fun.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. So public scrutiny. What have you experienced, and what do you do proactively to make sure that that you're being a good steward to the world and that you're conveying your company in the best possible light?
Well, this is more of an organizational front for our company, right? We are very, very much active in what our carbon footprint is. Our company actually we measure the entire enterprise's carbon footprint, and we'll buy offsets for all of that. But us as an aviation department as well, again, we try to keep a low profile, but there's also options out there that are now just coming into the market that we can participate in to be even better stewards of the environment, right? We all need to do what we can, for sure. The SAF fuels that are coming out, right? Those are becoming more and more popular. They're still quite expensive, right? So there's a cost for being green, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what we have to do, right? People don't seem to mind that yet, and as that becomes more commonplace, we would expect the cost of that to come down, right? So there's options and opportunities out there for sure that are becoming available as the technology gets better. But I think what folks have to consider is these airplanes have been decades in development, right?
Mhm.
So as the new airplanes come out, well, yeah, they perform better and they might be more fuel efficient and such, but this carbon footprint thing is really just a recent hot button item,
Mhm.
right? And so the industry is getting better, but now they're accelerating what that improvement's going to be to meet the needs of what the regulators are going to require, what the public wants to see, right? So just be a little bit patient,
Patient.
right? But we're getting there, right? So, this green energy thing, what, maybe the last 5 years?
Yeah.
Well, these airplanes were designed in the 80s and
Yeah.
90s,
Right.
right? So we're getting there, and there's a lot of opportunity that I think most operators are seeking and will begin to operate with.
What's interesting to me is our industry has such an impeccable safety record. And that took a lot of work for our industry, and we've implemented a lot of procedural and testing and whatnot, redundancies in aviation. There's a lot of things that go into the safety record that we now enjoy in the aviation industry. But we have a very low tolerance for failure, rightfully so, because
Right.
people lose their lives if it fails, right? So when you're talking about the new technology that's emerging with, engines that are burning more efficiently or electric propulsion, the technology is there. That's not the question. The reality is we got to go through a massive amount of testing because, like what we're doing, it's almost a zero fail mission.
Right.
And if you have 100 flight tests and an electric engine and it fails one time, well, you're back to the drawing board because our industry is safe and we want it to continue to be safe. And that's why the NTSB is involved. That's why the FAA is involved. Certification. It's extremely expensive for these manufacturers to come up with the technology. So we've been hearing this for about 5 years. We've been working on electric propulsion and efficiencies for decades. And we're actually way better. Like your Westwind probably burns as much fuel as your Global. Like
Right.
we've made huge
We
strides.
have.
But these things do take time. To your point, we got to be patient because failure is not an option because people lose their lives if it fails. And so we have to go through that testing. And this is going to be the same conversation with autonomous vehicles, with EV tolls, with any of the aerial mobility systems and whatnot. So I think those are two key issues that the corporate flight department is going to have to really focus on over the next several years. Being efficient, kind of quantifying the time savings and how they value their time
Right.
is going to be key. And then dealing with environmental issues and public scrutiny because that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Right. Now the public scrutiny is what it is.
Yeah.
It's been there for the entirety of our industry. It's become more noted and divisive here as of late, but those things tend to cycle. But what we want to do as an industry and especially in our department is just be good stewards of what we're given, right?
Right.
It's a blessing to do what we do. We want to do what's best for our company, but never lose sight of what's best for the environment and the world that we live in and the communities that we operate in.
Right. And at the end of the day, like we want to have fun at what we do. And I think these challenges, honestly, if we can talk about them openly, I think as we collaborate as an industry, I think we can have a lot of fun coming up with some solutions and ideas, exchanging ideas as an industry to, we can be good stewards and really enjoy our job at the same time.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun, right?
Yeah.
But it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
There's not a hard answer, and we need to be collaborative. It's not an either or.
Right.
It's got to be the collaborative effort amongst all of the stakeholders to continually make progress towards the goals that we've established, right? Whether it be economic, whether it be environmental.
Right. Well, I just want to say thank you again
Yeah, thank you.
for being on our podcast here, the Two Wings podcast. Hopefully, we'll see you again in a future episode, but I really appreciate your time. I want to take a quick moment to thank Jetaviva. That is my employer. Again, I don't work any day because I love what I do. Don't work a day in your life. And just want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.